Caution, this podcast contains adult language, sexual themes, and depictions of violence that some may find triggering. This podcast and its hosts are not responsible for the accuracy of the material presented, as it is strictly based on our own limited research and personal opinions. The information presented is not to be confused with actual investigative files pertaining to the cases or official court and/or law enforcement records and transcripts. What the fuck is going on, y'all? Welcome back to another episode of this fucking podcast. I cannot believe you are still listening. You are still rocking with me. We are still here, y'all. What's poppin'? I know you listened to last week, and if you did, you already know that fucking story was out of control, out of pocket, out of control. Which, I mean, isn't that on brand at this point? Like, isn't that like who I am? So, y'all, listen. Today's episode is a doozy. It is a lot. So today's story is centered around a murder that took place on August 22nd of 1922. Now, while the murder might have been the inciting event, y'all, it's the events that led up and the details about the people involved that will blow your mother-tucking mind. Now, I want y'all to tell me, what happens when an insane amount of audacity, charisma, and ruthlessness end up in the wrong hands? Well, stick around and find out, because today I can't. All right, y'all, what's going on? We are here. Let's just dive. We're going to slick our hair up, put it in a fucking cap, and we are diving the fuck into this story. Okay, so let's set the scene with a rich white couple in their 40s. They're named Dolly and Fred. Now, they're up at the local bar, turn it up. It's 1922, California. Like I said, they're wealthy, they're popular, they're the moment, they're having the time of their lives. Now, Dolly is like Lil' Kim in like 97. She is decked out in like jewels and a mink coat, pussy popping and scatting with her fingers. It's the 20s, they be scatting like scabba bum boo dum wow, boom boom, pop the pussy. All of it, they are scatting. I'm just picturing however them bad bitches used to dance in The Great Gatsby. And her husband, old Fred, he is vibing too. He's actually older than her. He's a lot older. He's probably in his 50s, but she's in her 40s. Well, little did Dolly and Fred know that this night on the town would be their last together. Now, shortly after they headed home from the club, police were called out to their mansion, which overlooked Sunset Boulevard, because neighbors complained of hearing what sounded like a gunshot, followed by the continued screams of a woman. Now, when the LAPD arrived, they found a crowd of concerned neighbors outside of the home, and the neighbors apparently entered with the police when they got access, when they were able to break down the door, which it's giving white neighborhood, what's that thing called, neighborhood watch? So when they walk in this mansion, the first thing they see is Fred on the floor in a puddle of his own blood with 3 gunshot wounds, 1 to the head and 2 to the chest. They also heard like the muffled screams of a woman, and they found Dolly locked in a closet of which the key had been tossed on the floor nearby, like someone locked her in and threw the key. Now, this is crazy. Once she was out of the closet, she told them how her and her husband had been the victims of a robbery gone wrong. She said that shortly after they got home, they heard a knock at the door. Her husband Fred went and answered it, and a struggle ensued between him and a man with a gun. The same man threw Dolly into a closet and proceeded to shoot her husband, rob them, and leave. Now, the police were a little perplexed, because while the furniture was disheveled and knocked around, they couldn't see that anything of value had been stolen. And what was even weirder is that Fred still had a wallet full of cash on him. Now, when they asked Dolly about this, she said that they stole her husband's one-of-a-kind, diamond-studded, octagon-shaped pocket watch. So, Most of the police officers, they were good with this story, but there was one investigator who was suspicious as fuck, and he thought Dolly was super sus. So, as much as they wanted to consider her a suspect, they knew that there was no way that she could have shot her husband and then locked herself into a closet and then thrown the key outside of the closet. So ultimately, they let Dolly off the hook and allowed this newly widowed woman to grieve, and they looked elsewhere for potential suspects. Okay, and this is when the plot is gonna get thicker than a snicker. So now we've got this crazy ass tragic murder. I want to rewind for a second, and I want to talk to you about who Dolly and Fred were, and I want to talk to you about their life and the moments that led up to this crazy ass scene that we all just stumbled upon together. So, Walburga Oesterreich, aka Dolly, her real name is Walburga. That's her government name. Like, welcome to good Walburga, home of the good Walburga. Can I take your order? She was born in 1880 to German immigrant parents. Now, we don't have a month or a date of birth, like a date on the calendar, or I would have already pulled her zodiac and told you what sign she is. After hearing this story, I'm gonna go with Scorpio, and you'll find out why. Anyways, at the age of 12 in Milwaukee, where she was born, um, Walburga, aka Dolly, worked at a textile mill that belonged to a man named Fred William Oesterreich. He was a young man. He was another German immigrant who had become super successful and frequently hired, fellow immigrants in his factories. So he had money. He's very young, but he's got money. Well, reportedly, Walburga Dolly, we're just gonna call her fucking Dolly at this point. My next note was she eventually changed her name to Dolly. Well, I need to start reading my notes more clearly. Um, she was apparently attractive and charismatic with a big bubbly personality and was super popular at the factory. By the age of 17, in about 1898 is the year, she caught the eye of her boss, who was a grown ass man. She and Fred, the factory owner, they got married. Which you already know I'm rolling my eyes because she was a damn teenager, and that's gross and predatory. But it was a different time and weird shit was normalized. But, anyways, Fred was a very serious and hardworking man who was a bit of an asshole, and honestly, like, nobody really liked him. But Dolly kind of acted as the middle person for him. So, like, the workers would bring their concerns to her, and she would talk, she would go and talk to Fred about their issues because, Fred was a dick, and they were like, well, can we talk to you? And she was just so well liked that she would take care of that for everyone. Well, shortly after their wedding, Dolly ended up getting pregnant and she gave birth to their son. Now, life was good, or quote unquote good, until her son died suddenly, somewhere around the age of like, I'm thinking between 10 and 13. We have nothing like solid. We don't even know how he died, but obviously, this, is enough to really fuck you up. So, this devastated the couple. And this is when Fred developed a serious drinking problem. And this is when Dolly developed a serious cheating problem. So Fred was always at work. So he's always been really consumed by his work. And he was at the factory all day. And when he would get home, he would just get fucked up and basically pass out. And didn't really know what was going on because he was just always fucking wasted, like drinking away his issues. Which, listen, I hear you. Like, this is serious trauma, losing a child. I can't fucking imagine. So Dolly was like, Ninja, I got needs, and I'm gonna find someone to fulfill them while you sleep. So this is when Dolly started sneaking around and hooking up with guys who worked at the factory. So she apparently had numerous short lived, passionate affairs, and she'd quickly break up with them before things got too serious. Like, like, bro, like, you gotta leave before you catch feelings. I got a whole husband at home, and I'm not trying to fuck this up, but he's also your boss, so let's not get crazy. Well, she had been doing this for a long time, very long time. So one day, it's 1913. She's like 33 years old, still a bad bitch apparently. She was like very, very attractive. And so she's at the factory. She's chatting it up with one of her homegirls who works there, talking about the Bachelorette. Like, you see the Bachelorette last night, girl? So this is when she's talking to her homegirl, and then mid sentence, she locks eyes with a 17-year-old boy who worked at the factory. And she's like, yep, That's gonna be my new conquest. Which again is fucking disturbing because he was a child, but whatever. Here we are. So she's formally introduced to Otto Sanhuber. This is the 17-year-old sewing machine repairman. So the next day or so, she tells her husband that her sewing machine is broken and that he needs to send someone home to fix it. So the husband's at work, and Otto, 17 years old, AutoZone, get in the zone, AutoZone, shows up at her house like knockety knock knock. This hoe opens the door in nothing but a robe, stockings, and heels, chow. Like literally the shit that movies are made out of. So naturally, she's like, bruh, like, hello, kitty, like, let's do this. So they hook up, and alas, whatever, a torrid and arguably consensual affair is birthed. And this is going to be one for the fucking ages. And it all starts here with come fix my sewing machine, aka, yeah. So they start this affair, and Fred is none the wiser. He has no fucking idea. And they started off meeting in the boarding house where Otto lived. But being the bad and bougie predator that Dolly was, she started paying for them to meet up in hotels. Well, they were hooking up with such high frequency, like they needed to do it so often, that she got nervous that her husband, old Fred, was going to notice all the hotel like money coming out of their accounts. So that's when this bitch got even more bold. So bold, like I'm talking Helvetica print bold. She looks at Otto one day. I need to sip of my water. Hold on. This is just too much. Hold on. She looks at him one day in his damn face with a straight face. And she says to him, listen, I want you to come fuck me at my house while my husband's at work. I'll give you money for the work you miss by calling out for these shifts. So she's bringing this man boy to the house during the day, and they're having sex, which it's really giving Eva Longoria's creepy ass character from Desperate Housewives, who was like fucking the lawn mower kid, the kid that would mow their lawn, who was like 16. It's fucking weird. Anyways, their little arrangement was cute, but they were hooking up so often that the neighbors started asking questions. And they were like, Miss Dolly, who this man? And, being the quick thinker that she was, she quickly came up with the lie that the man they'd been seeing was her vagabond, homeless half brother who she'd been helping out. So this lie, they believed it, but she was still shook and was like, nah, I'm not about to fuck this up. So she's like, I am going to take some more, we're taking some more steps to cover this shit up. She's like, I'm not about to lose my underage sneaky link. So she comes up with the most wild, out of pocket, Helvetica ass, audacity having ass cheating scheme that I have honestly almost ever heard in my 35 years of life. Probably the most, this is the most bold, yeah, that I've ever heard. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, this is it. I had to really think about it for a second. So she hits Otto up and she's like, yo, listen, AutoZone, why don't you quit your job, cut everybody off, and move into my attic? Now, I know you're thinking, why in the fuck would he say yes to this? But think about it. He's 17 years old. He's an orphan with no fucking family. And she's offering to take him in. He won't need to work or pay bills. He won't have to live in a stupid boarding house. He will just have to hide out in the attic and fuck her when her husband's at work. So to him, it sounded like a solid plan at first. So this bold ass Helvetica ass bitch moves him into the attic. And mind you, this attic is directly above she and her husband's bedroom. Like to gain access to the attic, you needed to go through the bedroom closet, and there was a door on the ceiling in there. Just next level bold. So she gets him a bed and a desk up there where he would read and write pulp fiction by candlelight at night. Now, side note, a few of his pieces that he wrote actually ended up getting published under a pseudonym, so he ended up making a little bit of change for himself during this era. So, during the day, he would reportedly, according to him, he had to bang this bitch like 8 to 10 times a day, and then he would do the chores she was supposed to do and cook the dinners, cook the meals that she was feeding to her goddamn husband. You imagine? Can you imagine? The person your wife is having an affair with is not only living above your bedroom, but he's cooking the meals that you're eating. Wild. So I guess homeboy would, have sex with Dolly, do the chores, make dinner, and then run up to the attic, and she would lock the door behind him before Fred would get home from work. Now, she would sneak him food and books, etc., etc., but she had a whole side chick living right above where she and her husband were sleeping. Now, you're probably also wondering, like, how in the hell did this man, Fred, not have access to his own fucking attic? Well, Dolly, just being this smart ass bitch, told him that she kept all of her expensive furs and minks up there and that she needed a lock for the door in case a burglar broke in. So she really had all her bases covered because he doesn't give a fuck about her furs and shit, so he didn't need a key. He's like, bitch, you keep the key. I don't give a fuck. So, homeboy's in the attic. Now, Fred ended up telling Dolly, he's like, bruh, I keep hearing noises. And, like, he's like, I'm seeing shadows go by. She gaslit the fuck out of him and told him that he was just seeing things because he was drunk. He would literally be like, bro, like, did you hear that? And she would be like, no, you're crazy, fam. Like, what are you talking about? Like, the gaslighting was so strong, that this chick went so far as to tell him to go to a doctor and get himself checked out because he was losing his mind. And he went. This ninja went to the doctor. And the doctor was like, bro, you're fine. And then she blamed everything on his heavy drinking and him being too stressed because of work. It's not funny. It's really not funny. Like I'm so stressed out about this and I'm getting congested. Like the more I talk, the more congested I'm getting. Like my nose wants no part of this story. So Fred would also tell her, he'd be like, girl, my cigars keep going missing and like why are we running out of food faster than usual? And she was just like, you're losing it, bro. She's like, you need help. All you do is drink. Like, that food ain't moving no faster than it used to. Something is wrong with you, which is just, I can't. Now, I hope you're sitting down for this next detail. I mean, as if this hasn't been crazy enough. Tell me why this ruse, this whole fucking situation, do you know how long this went on for? 5 years. 5 fucking years this went on until Fred decided to open a second factory outside of Milwaukee. He wanted to expand to LA. So he decided to open a second factory in Los Angeles in 1917. So Dolly is like, if we're going to move, we got to find a house that has an attic, period. Which apparently was very hard to find in LA. So the house hunting process took a lot longer than planned because they had to find a place with an attic, which also bought her time to like work on how she was going to keep her side dick and make this move across the goddamn country because as we know, Milwaukee, the Midwest is not close to California, girl. So they find a house finally with an attic and they go back to Milwaukee to pack up. And at this time, this is when Dolly sends AutoZone. She gives him the address, and she's like, "All right, go ahead of us. You're gonna go to this address. This is the house. Get settled in. Here's some money to like buy a desk, buy your shit, and you'll just move on in to the attic." And I'm sure she had him clean out the attic, while they were in California house shopping, like take all his shit out. I think he stayed at a hotel for a while, and then he moved on his own. Which this is really giving me like Stockholm syndrome because everyone's like, okay, for a while I was thinking, I felt bad that he was like a victim, that she was like holding him captive, but now he's free to go. But it's like he's still a victim. He was like 17, and this is giving extreme Stockholm. So he goes to California, gets set up. And while they move in, and while they're there, Dolly gets nervous, like real deal, like actually not lying, because there was a string of break-ins that was happening in the neighborhood. So this is when Otto, aka AutoZone, aka Addict Dick, goes out and buys a couple guns so that he can keep them safe. Like he feels a responsibility to this couple, which is just wild. Also, sidebar, Otto later said that he would hear them have sex because he was above the bedroom, but and he would just have to like grit his teeth because he was like in love with Dolly. He just had to grit his teeth and listen to her have sex with her husband. And apparently, she used to ask her husband, she'd be like, "Fred, like, can you keep it down? Like, can we be quiet?" And he was like, "Bitch, we'll live in the apartment. Like, we're not in the what the fuck? We don't have thin walls." And she'd be like, like, let's just, can you be quiet? And he would just be like, "Nah, bitch, fuck that shit. I pay rent. Like, I'm gonna be as loud as I want to be." So he's in there moaning and shit. And she's like, "Bro, like, no, like, my side dick is above you." Like, it's what she wanted to say, but obviously she couldn't. So, poor Otto was in the goddamn attic listening to her fuck old Fred, which apparently didn't have to happen very often because he was always whiskey dicked out and like wasted. But still, on those few occasions, you had to listen to the man who you just cooked dinner for fuck your girlfriend. Wild. So, there was a string of break ins. Otto buys a gun, a couple guns, and he has them. Now, at the same time, Fred is freaking out again because he's like, "Bro, these fucking noises from the old house followed me here." So naturally, like, he thinks he's losing his mind. He's working like crazy per usual. He's drinking like crazy, probably drinking more because he thinks he's going crazy. And this takes a toll on their marriage, and they start fighting all the time. But they stay together. And this whole shenanigan of three's company, but not knowing a third is in the fucking attic, goes on for another 5 years. We're looking at 10 years total. So it goes on for another 5 years until the night that Dolly and Fred came home from the party and proceeded to have what would be the last argument that they would ever fucking have. All right. So, apparently, when Fred and Dolly came home from a party at a local bar, which is the scene we opened with, they were already drunk and fighting. So, you already know their marriage, like, shit was just already had gone to shit. So, allegedly, the argument, once they got home, turned into what sounded like a scuffle. And so that's when Otto jumps out of the fucking attic like Bruce motherfucking Willis and runs into the living room like guns blazing. Literally, he had two 25 caliber guns in his hands, and he's like, "What you not finna do is hurt my slave master. That's what you not finna do." And Fred is shook. He's like, "I know this ninja who used to work for me is not in my goddamn house about to shoot me, talking about some like, oh, my wife, whatever." So Fred is just shook and stressed and like, "Are you fucking kidding me? Why is this kid who's in his 20s or I don't know, wait, he's probably in his 30s by now. Jesus Christ, 17, 10 years? He's like 27. My math skills are really, 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 really bad. Fuck you for laughing at me." Anyways, he's like, "Why is this kid standing here with these guns?" So he bucks. He's like, "Nuck if you buck, bro." So he jumps at Otto, grabs him by the wrists. They are fighting. And obviously, like in every movie, a gunshot goes off. And I guess it hit the ceiling and it startled Fred. He's like, "Bro, like probably looking down, like, am I shot? Am I shot?" And this is when AutoZone is like, "Nah, you ain't shot yet, homie." So Otto shoots him twice in the chest and once in the head, killing him instantly. So this is when Dolly and Otto are looking at each other like, "Uh-oh, SpaghettiOs, like, what the fuck did we just do?" So Otto comes up with this, like, instantly comes up with a plan. He's like, "We need a plan. This is a quiet ass white neighborhood. Like, they're gonna call the police." So he locks Dolly in a closet and he takes the guns, the money in the house, and the keys to the attic. He threw those. And he also took Fred's diamond pocket watch and he hid in the attic. So that brings us up to speed where we left off, where the police find Dolly in a closet. Drop Dead Fred is literally drop dead dead on the floor. And she's like, "Bro, like somebody broke in. Someone, it was a home invasion. They robbed us, threw me in the closet. They stole all this shit. Like I told you guys earlier, the police are like, this is weird." So they took her testimony into account, but they were still skeptical because only some cash and a apparently one of a kind diamond pocket watch were missing. However, the wallet was still filled with cash in Fred's pocket, and none of the valuables in the home had been touched. So they were suspicious, but they accepted it as a robbery gone wrong, and they dismissed her as a suspect because they realized that there was no way she could have killed him. Like I told you, there was no way she could have killed him in the closet. We already covered this. So Dolly has a funeral for Fred and proceeds as a, she proceeds to inherit millions and millions of dollars from him, and then she's free. Like she's all the single ladies, and she's free to live her best life. And she's got millions of dollars. She don't got to deal with drop dead Fred no more and whiskey dick. And so she takes the money. She buys a new house on her own and moves there with Otto. But the weird fucking thing is that she looked for a house with an attic, and they unanimously decided that he wanted to continue living in the attic. So he did. And he continued writing pulp fiction, and like I said, some of his work had been published, and at this point, he's earning money. So he earned enough money to buy a typewriter, and since there was no one to hear the noise of the keys clicking, clickety clack clack clack, he could finally stop writing books by fucking hand and by candlelight and actually write them, with a fucking typewriter. So investigators are still trying to figure out who done it, and they're completely baffled at this point. All they know is that someone broke into the house and that Fred was shot with a 25 caliber pistol. Now, police, they reach out to this guy named Harry No Styles, who was Fred's former plant manager, and he was the plant manager in Milwaukee, and I guess he was in LA to help Dolly with like Fred's affairs and all his shit. So they're like, tell me about Fred. Tell me about your relationship with Fred. Tell me about anyone that might have disliked him. And he told him that Fred was difficult to work with, had a short temper towards his employees, was drunk all the time, and was a fucking asshole, and no one liked him. So, by winter 1923, this is a year later, there's no suspects, there's no fucking ideas. They had gone through some suspects. I think there was someone that had worked at the plant that hated Fred, but that guy went to jail, so it was like for something unrelated. So it's like he'd been writing like these letters to Fred, like threatening him, because I guess they had some bad business deal. So they kind of thought it was him, but they're like nothing's pointing in that direction, and this guy was in prison, so like it couldn't have been him. So around this time, a year later, Dolly, who had hired a lawyer immediatamente when she knew that there was a chance she could have been a suspect, she hired a lawyer named Herman Shapiro, and Herman, helped her get, dismissed as a suspect. And this is when she looks at him, turns her head to the side, and she's like, "You kind of cute." And so she starts a romantic relationship with Herman Shapiro. Yes, she's dating him while Otto is still in the attic. Yes. So they're dating, and for his birthday, when his birthday comes around, she decides to give him a gift. A diamond pocket watch. The same diamond pocket watch that she told the police was stolen from her husband during the fake-ass robbery. So, I guess Herman Shapiro, Hermes, Herbie Fully Loaded, he questioned her about it, and she was just like, "Nah, baby, like, this ain't the same watch." So they continue dating, but Herman is working long hours as an attorney, so naturally she gets deja vu, and she's like, "I'm gonna go get dick vu," and she's like, "I'm gonna go meet some new guys." So she gets on Tinder. She's got a whole boyfriend and someone living in her attic, and who she reportedly was fucking like multiple times a day, but I guess she was taking a break and letting him write and clean and do her laundry and stuff in the attic. I don't fucking know. So she's bored with Herman because the lawyer's working too many crazy hours. So she goes out and she meets a man named Roy Klum. Now, he was a flashy guy. He was popular. He was out popping at the club, popping bottles with models and shit. And so she goes out and she's like, pussy popping in VIP with him. And she's like, "You know what? Period. Like, let's do this." So they start banging. So whenever Herman is busy, she's out fucking Roy. And whenever Roy is busy, she's fucking Herman. And when they're both busy, she just goes up to the attic and is fucking AutoZone. Which, I mean, it's giving me Quasimodo. It's giving me very the Hunchback of Los Angeles. Like, he's up in his bell tower. It's just a lot. But She's got three things going on. Like she's just doing the utmost. And this just tells you how bold she is and how good of like a bullshitter and like sweet talker and how charismatic she was. And apparently, and not to be graphic here, but I mean she couldn't have been bad in the sack because apparently like she got these men wrapped around her finger. And the plot thickens. So she's out with Roy. Roy's like obsessed with her. She convinces Roy to dispose of a gun that she said she had, for protection, but it reminded her of, her husband's murder. So his dumbass takes it to a tar pit and throws it out into a tar pit to like get rid of it. She then takes the second gun that she had, because like I told you, old boy came down like the Wild Wild West um, with two guns, but I got me a few on. She takes the second gun and sweet talks her neighbor into burying it for her in their yard. Which I'm like, bitch, why wouldn't you have just thrown them out yourself? Like, go to the fucking. You're in California. Throw that shit in the water. Like, why are you asking men for favors? Because now you got people who know too much. But, anyways, she talked her neighbor into burying it because she told him that, it's a gun that she has for protection, but she didn't want the police to find it and, like, make her look suspicious or some shit. So they do it. So another year goes by, and detectives get an anonymous tip stating that Herman Shapiro, her lawyer Bay, is wearing the same watch that she said had been stolen. So the cops are like, let's reopen this shit. And of course, they're like, bitch, you gifted the same watch that you said was stolen. So they're like, surprise, surprise, you're a fucking suspect again, bitch. So this is around the same time when she decides to dump Roy and she's trying to cut her losses. She's trying to lay low, cut down the dick list to just Herman the lawyer and Otto in the attic. So Roy is like, skirt, like, nah, bitch, fuck you and the clique you claim. There ain't no way that you just had me dispose of a fucking gun and I'm here for you and you're gonna dump me like this? So in a true Karen fashion, like a scorned Karen without the bob, he runs to the police, like straight to the police. Roy does, and he tells them how she had him dispose of her gun. And so this shit hit the newspapers. And this is when her neighbor came forward and was like, "Oh wow, like same sis." So now the cops are like, "Wait, this bitch had two different people dispose of 25 caliber guns after her husband's death." So they dig up the gun that Roy had thrown in the tar pit, which I don't know fucking how they found that. And her neighbor digs up the other gun. But both guns are too badly eroded to be used as evidence outside of knowing that they were 25 caliber guns, which was kind of all they needed to run with this, and because they knew that Fred was shot with a 25 caliber bullet. So this is when they detain her little hot ass. They detain her in July of 1923. So she is held on a $50,000 bail, which is so much money at that time. That would literally be like $900,000 today. So her trial was set for December, but because the only thing they had against her was Roy's fucking testimony and two fucked up guns, the charges were dropped and she was released. So get this shit. 7 more years go by. It's 1930 now. And Dolly and Shapiro, Herman Shapiro, the lawyer bay, they break up because he finds out she was cheating on him, which, I mean, that's literally her MO. And this is when he pulls a full Karen and he runs to the police and he's like, I'm a snitch. So he tells them that when she was in jail back in 1923 for that short amount of time when she was waiting for her trial before the case got dropped, he says that she was talking to him, when he was visiting her in jail, and he goes, "Hey, can you do me a big favor?" And he's just like, "Anything for you, bae. And she's like, "Okay, I need you to go by the grocery store and deliver a bag of groceries to my house and drop them off by the attic door in my house and then leave." And he's like, "What the fuck? Like, excuse me?" And she's like, "Yeah, I totally forgot to tell you. I have like a vagabond half brother who's living with me, and I'm taking care of him, and like he needs to eat." So get this shit, he does it, but because he's a lawyer, he sticks around to ask questions. Like he's like, I'm not gonna just blindly walk into this shit and like leave and not ask who the fuck this man is. So he sticks around and he sees a 30-year-old pasty looking man crawl out of the fucking attic like Quasimodo, and the guy introduces himself as Otto. So Herman's like, okay, like, I'm Herman Shapiro. He's like, so you're, my girlfriend's brother. And Otto was like, skirt, no, I'm her lover. And then Herman's like, the girl is mine. And he's like, no, the girl is mine. So it's Brandy and Monica. They're up there shooting the new music video for The Boy Is Mine. And then Otto tells Herman, he's like, I'm telling you all the tea. So Otto tells Herman Shapiro the whole story about how he was an orphan, he used to work for Fred, and how he started fucking Dolly when he was 17, and how he's been smashing her ever since, and how he had to like fuck her all these millions of times a day, allegedly 8 to 10 times, which is not. I argue that that's not humanly possible. I mean, I guess it is, but every day 8 to 10 times, there's so many things that would go wrong with like your body from doing it. Like, I mean, the chafing, uh, elasticity issues, maybe. I don't know. I just feel like it would be a mess. But anyways, he tells him maybe he's also trying to flex a little because he's like, "Oh, you fuck her too? Well, I was fucking her 15 times a day." So I don't know why I gave him that accent. 15 times a day. So he tells him the whole story, and somehow they stumble upon Fred's murder. And this is when this fucking boy, AutoZone, he's not even a boy at this point. He's like 30. AutoZone keeps running off at the mouth, and he starts telling everything. Everything. He told Herman Shapiro, everything that happened the night when he killed Fred. And I think because of the fact that Otto hasn't been able to talk to other humans because he's been locked in an attic, and the only interaction he's had has been with Dolly, that he was just excited to talk to another person. And he just, I mean, loose lips, verbal mouth diarrhea, whatever you call it. So he tells him this whole story. And, Shapiro is sitting there like, the fuck? So, of all the things that Herman Shapiro could have done, he was obsessed with Dolly and he loved her. So he gives Otto money and it's like, bro, you're going to be a suspect. You need to fucking leave town. He helps him pack his bags and he sends him off to Canada to run away and to, get out of Dodge for this crime that he's now confessed. And I truly think that he felt bad for him in a way. Like, I do feel like there was, like, damn, like, your life has sucked and you're fucked up. You need to go. So by the time she'd gotten out of jail, because remember, this was 1923. This was like, when she had gotten arrested. By the time she got out of jail, Otto was gone. He was already in Canada. He ended up changing his name, got married, and went on to live his life. And this is when Herman Shapiro moved in with her. Her lawyer moved in with her. And they lived together from, that initial arrest and when Otto ran away in 1923 until 1930 when he found out she was creeping on him, and then he dumped her and then ratted her out to the fucking cops like a true Karen would. So, with this discovery, the police, because they're sitting there like, you sat on this information for 7 fucking years, really? They do a search. They find Otto in Canada. He had a different name, but they still found him. They questioned him and they charged him with the murder of Fred. They also arrested Dolly and charged her with conspiracy. So, Otto admitted to killing Fred, admitted to shooting him 3 times. He said he shot him out of self-defense and out of fear that Fred was hurting Dolly. So Dolly's arrested, and all this shit goes viral, like, big time. It's on the cover of every fucking newspaper. They called him the Batman. They called him the lover in the attic. It was like the lover in the attic murders. Like, they came up with all types of good names for this shit. So while she's in jail the second time, this is when Fred's family, drop dead Fred, his family apparently found an alleged alternative version of his will where he had given, money to his family, but also to like different charities and like all types of shit, and only left Dolly with like $30,000. Well, they contested the will that she presented, but it went nowhere. They could not prove it. So all this is happening while she's in jail. So it's 1930. It's April now. AutoZone is indicted for Fred's murder, and like I said, so is Dolly's indicted for conspiracy. They're in jail. So, Otto's attorneys focused on painting a picture of his age when the affair began, and the fact that she manipulated him and that she groomed him and that he was basically a victim. But despite his lawyer's efforts, like obviously the jury was like, nah. They ruled that he was guilty, but only of manslaughter, which is a lesser charge than the original first degree murder charge that was on the table. Well, all of this happened. The jury, it's a high stakes, highly publicized, very emotional trial, and he's found guilty. Well, the gag is the statute of limitations on the manslaughter had already run out. So he's released. Scot free. He's good to go. So he dips, he moves back to Canada with his wife, live his best life, never heard of again. So Dolly's trial was coming up, and the same thing basically happened. Now, being the rich bitch that she was, she hired the iconic, sought after attorney Jerry Geisler to represent her. And quick aside, Jeremy had a string of, Jeremy, really? Jerry had a string of high profile cases under his belt. But he would go on to represent Marilyn Monroe in her much publicized 1954 divorce from Joe DiMaggio. He also represented Zsa Zsa Gabor. Like he's representing all of like the baddies, which is just, he loved a good controversial case. So, back to Dolly's case, which is one of his first like huge controversial cases. So at the trial, they tried to paint her out to be this, femme fatale, sex crazed predator, which, I mean, we're not wrong here, who groomed this boy into being her sex slave, which that was actually a word that Otto used when he described it in court. He said he was a sex slave. But basically, she groomed this boy, turned him into a sex slave, fucked everybody, and then killed her husband to get the insurance money and inheritance. So she testifies. And like I said, she's a very charismatic woman. She gets up there, she testifies, and she told them that it was all a freak accident and that, it wasn't planned and that, Otto didn't plan on killing him. There was no plan to murder her husband. It just happened. It was just one of those freak crazy accidents. And they ended up getting a hung jury. And since they couldn't come to a decision, the judge ended up declaring a mistrial. And ultimately, Dolly was free to go. So Dolly was released in December of that year, and she went on to live her best life in LA. She quickly found a new man, kept rolling around in her inheritance money, and she became a staple in the LA party scene at the time. She died at 80 years old in 1961, 2 weeks after she married her long-term lover. I don't know what the fuck happened to Otto. I'm assuming he went back to living under his new name in Canada, and his wife, you know, she had his back, by the way. She supported him and told reporters, like, my husband was a victim. Fuck that shit. She was a ride or die. But I'm sure they just went on to live their life and pretend like this traumatic ass shit had never happened. But, I can't pretend it didn't happen, bitch. This shit is wild. So, yeah, that is the end of today's story. I want to thank you all for sitting tight through this wild, wild story. And just know there is more to come. If you want to see, some, cool, fun facts and stuff, you can follow the Instagram account, which is at Bitch I Can't Pod. So go on there, follow it. And yeah, guys, I will talk to you soon. You will hear another episode very soon. This microphone fucking sucks, but yeah, we will talk soon. And have a good one. Bye.